Good morning, third years. Right, we're going to look at the marking out of our birdhouse, or at least the wooden part of it today. We'll begin by talking a wee bit about the wood that we're going to use. We will list the tools and the names of the parts of the tools, which is important. And then we're going to look at the processes for marking out 3 different types of joint today: miter joint, half lap joint, and rebate joint, one at a time. Now, you should be taking notes while we're doing this. You will be asked, both within the homework and assessment, how you would describe the measuring and the marking out of wood in any particular product. This, of course, is a box, essentially, and therefore this is carcass construction. Right, so we'll put the birdhouse out the way just for a wee moment. We'll look at the wood that's available to us just now. So this is 12mm thick poplar. Poplar is spelt P-O-P-L-A-R. And it's 12mm thick. I have cut this appropriately to the size, so it's 100, as we discussed the last time, by 120. And we have 4 pieces exactly the same. It's been rough sawn on the table saw and then put through the thicknesser so that they are all exactly the same thickness. We've belt sanded up against the edge just to make sure that they are nice and square, and I'm happy with all of those 4 pieces. So that's 4 pieces of poplar. Now, another name for poplar is tulip wood. That essentially is used mostly in the UK. The wood itself, poplar, comes from the eastern United States, particularly in the south of the United States. It's a relatively smooth feel to the wood, even when it is rough sawn. It's a smooth texture in the grain. Fibres of wood aren't really coarse in any way. You'll notice also that it's quite a light cream colour. There's a relatively straight grain all the way through, which means it's not too wavy and uneven. That would cause the wood to bend and skew, and we don't really get this issue with this wood. In addition to that, it's quite sparse of knots. You don't really get knots in a lot of places in the wood. It's a lot to do with how the wood's been sawn. This has been sawn through and through, so you could see where the centre of the tree roughly was there, and that kind of eliminates knots and imperfections and weak points in the wood. Properties. Poplar it's relatively strong. It's a pretty durable wood, so it's appropriate for us to use it in this birdhouse. It glues quite well in the joints, and when you're finishing it, it accepts stain, oil, paint, and wax relatively well, despite the fact that it is quite a resinous wood. Added benefit is it's also quite easy to work with hand tools in the workshop. That's the main reason why we're using it for you. Okay, right, last little thing before we get to marking out. If we look at the exemplar from last time, I want to point out the joints to you. So a miter joint would be found on this corner here. You can see the 45-degree angle going through. The opposite corner here. And it's pretty much a 45-degree angle that is cut and planed, possibly even sanded to a degree, but we try not to sand joints too much. And then also maybe splined and strengthened on the edge, although we haven't done it on this one. A half lap joint, that's the second type we're going to be marking out, is found here on this edge and here on this edge. And this basically means that the 2 outer pieces of wood here and here have housings cut in them to accommodate the edge of this one and the edge of this one. And lastly, but not least, a rebate joint would be the joint on all 4 of these pieces of wood that hold and house this 3mm piece of acrylic that fits in there to allow that to be flush to the outside edge. So this is the range of tools that we have available in the workshop for measuring and marking out wood. At the top, obviously, this is steel rule. Down here we have a marking gauge, and we'll go over parts in a little while. We've been used to using this in the past. Similar to the marking gauge is the mortise gauge. We don't need that on this project, but you do need to be able to identify a difference between the two. We have a tri-square, and we will also be looking at a sliding bevel, although this might not always be available to you. And last but not least, we'll be looking at the bradawl as well, which helps us to mark out and set holes for drilling and positioning screws and whatnot. Only other thing that you possibly need is sharp pencil and maybe a rubber. So a steel rule is relatively self-explanatory. You have millimetre increments and units all the way up and down each side. This one is also numbered by centimetre. Remember, 10 millimetres for each centimetre. It's made out of steel. It's not sharp in any way, and some of the older ones have inches on the opposite side. Clearly we don't use inches to measure and mark out. The spelling's here for you. Next tool we're going to revisit is the tri-square from first and second year. So that is TRI square. And parts, if we remember, the long flat metal bit here is the blade. This wooden part at the left hand side, this is not the handle, this is the stock. On the inside we have the brass plate, and then we have brass rivets that hold those two parts together. And the angle between the blade and the brass plate is clearly a right angle. It is 90 degrees, and that's the tri-square. So the next tool we're going to look at is the marking gauge. If you remember, we used this in first year. The marking gauge has 4 parts to it that you need to remember the names of. We have the stem, which is the longer part here, the stock, which is the fatter part that runs up and down the stem, and the stock is the main part that we hold when we're marking out. You have the thumb screw, which tightens to hold the position of the stock onto the stem, and you have the spur, which is like a little jagged metal nail at the end, and that's actually what makes the mark in the wood, and that is the marking gauge. Now, next one we'll look at, this is the mortise gauge. And the mortise gauge is essentially the same sort of tool as the marking gauge, but you'll notice that on one side we have a spur sticking out, and on the other side we actually have 2 spurs sticking out. And this is so that we can mark out mortise and tenon joins in frame construction. As we're not building a frame today and we're doing a carcass, then we won't be needing this tool. Just be really careful if you're going to be picking up a marking gauge that you don't accidentally pick this up instead. You could make a bit of a mess of your wood if you did. And the last one to look at today for wood marking out is this one here. This is a bradawl. Now, spelling bradawl. Now, bradawl is essentially, it's almost like a little screwdriver. It's a little bit sharper on the end. And this is for making marks and indents in wood where screws would go, or where you're wanting to center a drill. If you're going to be drilling into your wood, we do have clearly 2 holes at least on the face of this product, so we're going to need to be using a bradawl at some stage. Now, if we revisit our drawing from last time, I clearly last time had not put all of the measurements into this drawing, but I'll work through some of those different sizes today. It's also a good idea on a drawing if you had to take a line from each of these parts and number them or name them. So the top piece here for the birdhouse, which would be this piece, we could call that top, or we could call that part A. So we'll just put A in a circle. The bottom could be B. The back of the carcass could be C, and let's just name the front D for now. So you would refer to them by letter or by name. Right, first part we're going to start working on then is part A, which is the top, and we'll use this piece of wood here to reflect that. I think we'll decide that this is going to be the outside. It's a wee bit nicer on the grain to be looking at there, so I think we'll keep that to the outside. So we'll write A on one side, or you would put top. Next thing we're going to do is we need to think about where the miter is actually going to go. And in this instance, I think we want to put it at that edge there. That would be where the part D comes down, that would have the hole for the bird to go in. So we know we want the miter at that corner. There's absolutely nothing wrong with writing that on your wood, putting a little arrow next to it, just to remind yourself where it's going to be. It can also be a good idea to write on this piece inside, just in case you mark the wood the wrong way around. Now what we could do here, we know the wood's 12 millimeters thick, so what we could do here is, imagining that the next piece of wood would come in and miter into this corner, we could take the steel rule and measure and mark 12 millimeters on here with a little increment. Always mark on the outside edge of the wood, never mark in the middle somewhere, always on the edge. So steel rule up against the edge, measure and mark at 12. We could take the steel rule out of the way, bring in the tri-square and chase the line across. We'll try and keep that straight for you. So you'd hold the stock, hold the wood, keep it flat, and try and mark on the outside of the blade if you can. The other way that we could have done it, of course, is to take the piece of wood that's actually going to fit into there. And instead of having to measure that size, we could take that piece of wood, simply place it flush to that edge at the top. You see my fingers trying to keep it straight here. I could take my pencil and then put a little increment, just a little mark just on that top edge. Now, I wouldn't want to take that all the way down because I don't know if I'm going to get that straight in at 90 degrees, but at least I've got the thickness there. Now, if I put that mark on there and then take the other piece of wood away, you'll see that there's just a little ½ millimeter worth of a difference there. So I would have been cutting that joint just a wee bit too short. I've marked it too short. Now, it's just a tolerance when I've been holding the steel rule on. The pencil itself has a thickness, so I didn't take that into account. So I'll just come down to the new mark that I've got, chase that one along, and I'm relatively happy with that. That waste's coming off, so there's no need to rub off that first one. Now, if we place the piece of wood here and then chase that mark around to that corner, that's obviously where the miter is going to start, and it would come up and connect to there. That's the outer corner. If we look at the birdhouse, we're talking about this piece of wood here. Now, there would be nothing cut off from the outside of the wood at that edge, which means that this edge here is kept, nothing's cut off of this side. Just to make that absolutely crystal clear for ourselves, we'll take the pencil and I'm just going to rub the pencil along that edge. Maybe tidy up that little overspill there. And I know that I want to be able to keep that wood. Okay, mark that in the corner. And a quick way of marking the angle there is clearly just to go from your mark on that edge, I'll just flip this upside down just now, to the opposite corner, hold on your rule, and then mark the line across. And that shows you where the miter would be cut. Now, in addition to that, that's kind of a faster, kind of a, pardon the pun, cutting the corner way of doing it. The more accurate way of doing it is to use another tool, which is this one here. This is a sliding bevel. And the sliding bevel is very similar to the tri-square, but the bonus here is that you can change the angle to whatever you like. Now, we need that angle to be 45 degrees. Now, we can use a protractor to set that, we can use a pre-existing part to set that, or we could simply take a set square up against the sliding bevel to the 45 degrees and tighten with the wing nut there. Okay, set squares are marked, manufactured to size, so the 45 degree angle we can more or less confirm that that's correct. Next thing we would do is we would take the sliding bevel and hold the stock up tight against the wood here slide the blade up to meet, pencil on the point, blade into match, and just continue that line across. Now, if we've set that tool once, that means we can use exactly that size and that tool on all corners of both miter joints. And therefore, we know it's going to be exactly the same from one to the next. So I think we'll just keep that set anyway and put it to the side. But as we've only got a few of those, it was important to show you both ways of doing that. Now, this wood here for the miter, it's clear that this would be the waste that's coming off. So waste, remember, needs to be marked with hatching to show that it's waste. And hatching, if you remember, is 45-degree lines, a few millimeters apart. You don't need to be too accurate with that, but as long as it's not scribbled in or anything. And then change the angle when you come round to the miter edges, just so it's perpendicular to the cut. And then also don't forget to mark that waste on the outside edge also. Okay, and that's the miter joint marked out on one piece. I'll just quickly go ahead and do the other one. So we'll keep part A here. I'll just write that in the bottom again. Bring the other piece of wood in here, and this would be B for the bottom, and we'll keep the outside here. B, bottom, outside, and the miter, remember in this instance, wants to be the opposite side of the birdhouse, so that's that corner there. So we'll do miter here, okay? Excuse me. Right, so again, 12 millimeters in, or piece of wood that we want to actually use. Yep, happy enough with that. Okay, so we have the mark on the edge of the wood, try square in, chase the line across, get that mark there, that mark there, sliding bevel comes in. Okay, I'm sorry guys, I should kind of be doing this all the one way around, but I'm sitting down at the moment to try and do this demonstration for you, so I'm having to turn it from time to time. Okay, mark across there. Remember, little outside edge with your pencil, and that shows you where the miter joint is there. Happy with that, all looks in the right place. Mark our hatching to show the waste area. And again, on that top edge. Okay, and that's clear enough to show what would be intended to be cut off. So that gives us the bottom with the miter here, the top with the miter there. Next thing to do, we would have the front and the back. Back would be part C, front would be part D. We'll just mark those just now. So we have C, outside back, and D, front, outside. Happy enough with that. Right, now, I'm obviously, as I'm doing this, I'm referring back to the drawing, which is just sitting up here to make sure that I'm looking at the correct part. That's what your working drawing's for. You should have that in the workshop, and it should be in front of you while you're measuring and marking out. So if I put C and D back kind of into position, I understand that this corner here needs to come up to here. So I know that the miter is going to be up on that outside edge. On C, I know it's going to be on the bottom edge, so I'll just put M for miter there, M for miter there. I'll fill those in the wee second and put these other two pieces out of the way for now. Okay, so miter with an arrow pointing that way, miter with an arrow pointing that way. Okay, and maybe this time, just to help myself out, in case I get muddled up, I'm going to just mark across that outside edge, just darken that up a little bit. So so it's visible for you. I don't always do that in the workshop, it's just so that you can see it more clearly on camera. Okay, keep them the right way around. I'll do away with one just now, bring the other one forward, and this is D, flip that over. A is clearly going into D, so I'm just going to hold that piece of wooden top, make a little mark on the outside edge. Just double check I'm happy with that, that's itself, good stuff. Turn the thing round, bring in tri-square, pencil the point, tri-square up to meet it, and chase the line across. Now later on you're going to see me doing half lap joints and chasing the line all the way around to make sure that it's square. You don't need to do it in this instance because we're not going to be cutting too deeply. Okay, so we've got that ready there. We're going to bring the sliding bevel back in. Okay, pencil in the point, sliding bevel up to meet it, and mark your miter to the corner. Do the opposite, holding the stock onto the wood. Try and bring your thumb over just to help hold it in place. Pencil in the point, slide it up to meet it, and extend the line up to the corner. Mark in the waist with hatching. Opposite side, and mark the waist with hatching. Okay, that's D. Go ahead and do C now. Okay, and that's C measured and marked out also. I'll just place all four together again just so that you understand where they're all going to sit. And that shows you where those miters will go together once the waist is cut off. Okay. Right, next thing we're going to look at is the half laps. The half laps would appear here and here. Now, if we just place those down for now, or out of the way for now, I'll bring the birdhouse back in so that you can see this. So on the drawing and on the finished birdhouse, the half laps are going to occur here and here, but you need to understand which pieces of wood the half lap is actually cut into. Now, this piece here, running across the top, would go into the piece of wood at the back. So A would go into C. C is definitely thinner here. That's not quite at the 12 millimeters. There's only 6 left there. So this, in actual fact, is the piece of wood that the half lap's going to be cut into. So we'll turn C back over. We know it's going to be at the top section of that one. And then you can see the opposite one here. So that's going to be at the bottom of part D. A, which is the top, and B, which is the bottom, in actual fact don't get anything else cut in them at this stage. So those can both go out of the way. We'll bring D back over to the side. We know we're working with C. We can see where the miter is going to go. So the half lap joint obviously needs to go to the inside at the top of C here, okay? Right, so we take C, we're going to turn it around so that we're looking at the inside. Again, we'll take a steel rule, measure and mark 12 for material thickness. Check A against it just to make sure it's okay. In this instance, it actually is. Happy with that. And then we go about the process of chasing the line. So tri-square goes on the wood. I'll stand up for this. Try and hold the stock of the tri-square in your weak hand. Pencil in the point. Try and hold the outside of the material with your thumb of the same hand so that your pencil hand's completely free. Slide the blade up to meet it. Chase the line across. Turn the material so that you're looking at the edge. Hold the wood in the same way. Pencil on the point, and you can get that if you just turn the wood a little bit. Pencil on the point, blade up to meet it, mark across, like so. Flip it back over once again. Complete the same process. And then lastly, I'm going to join these two up, but obviously make sure that you're getting it square and they meet up on this corner. Now, a couple of things. If you chase the line around and where the two lines converge and come together on that back edge, if you have a little gap there, there's maybe a couple of things causing that. Could be something's gone wrong, either the tool's maybe been dropped at some point, it's not quite got a 90-degree angle here, or you haven't held it tightly enough with the stock against the material. The other thing that can happen is if the wood has been cut and left for a while in the school workshop, then the wood could actually have shrunk or expanded from one side to the next, and that could potentially cause a little gap in those lines. Right, next thing we're going to do is we have the height, if you like, of the half lap marked out. We need to decide how far through this is going to go. Clues in the name, it's a half lap, it's going to be half of 12, which is 6. So what we need to do is we could take, oh, there we go, take the marking gauge here, and we can set that to 6mm. Now this can be a wee bit awkward sometimes. My tip to you is to loosen it, let your thumb slide underneath the stock, and with your weak hand you could take your steel rule, hold it against the stock and the stem, and just bring the stem down or slide the stock up until the spur hits 6mm. Okay, there or thereabouts. Now, I am intentionally going to make that just a little bit too large just now, but imagine that I have made that halfway. Keep it at that size, give it a little tighten. So we've come up to the edge of the bench, and we know that we want to mark the half lap around here. So I'm going to take the stock of the tool, this is the part that we're holding with, and I'm going to keep the stem and the spur pointing towards me. Put the stock and the stem against the edge of the wood and roll it around until we make a little dent in the material. Now that little dent in the material, I will highlight that. Where did we go? I will highlight that with my pen. You wouldn't ordinarily do that, it's just let you see where it is. And obviously that little dot where the spur has gone on is not in the centre. Now, a couple of things you could do. You could just adjust the tool. Some people like to loosen it, tighten it up and just do that visually. Some people like to give it a little knock just to try and move the thing. And that's the method I prefer. And what you could do is then roll it back on, do exactly the same process, stock and stem against the wood, flip the wood over to the other side, and if you have the spur falling into exactly the same hole, then it's the same distance from both sides, and you know for a fact that that is definitely bang in the middle. There's actually no need to measure it. If the spur falls in the same hole when you mark it from one side to the next, the tool is centered. So I'm relatively happy with that. I need to mark the rest of the joint up now. So what we do is, sorry, I'll just adjust the camera. What we do is, if we position the wood against the edge of the bench like so, with the wood pointing towards me, I'm going to take the stock and the stem, spur pointing towards my body, and I'm going to roll the spur around until it touches the edge of the wood and push down and mark into the wood, mark a little groove into the wood just down to where your half lap line actually stops. We're then going to flip the wood around the other way, complete exactly the same process. Okay, that's it here. And then we can turn the wood again and mark all the way down the end grain. Sometimes I like to just bring the wood up to my tummy, hold it nice and firmly and pull towards me as well. End grain can be a wee bit difficult to mark. Okay, now that we've done that, back up onto the bench, and we can see where the little groove has been made by the spur. I'm going to put my pencil in there just to accentuate that a little bit. All the way along the end grain, and then on the opposite side too. Now, here's the part where some people go kind of astray. We've marked on the outside of the wood which part we're working on and where the mitre is going to go. And some people accidentally, when they're marking the waist here, they mark the outside instead of the inside. It has to be the inside. The inside's where part A is going to come up and accommodate. It's going to slot into here. So it has to be this surface that gets marked out. So we'll do that one first just to keep us right. Okay. Flip it over and it's going to be the opposite one here. And then we mark the inside of the half lap with hatching, and then mark the end grain of the half lap. And that's all you show. That symbolises what's going to be taken off of the material. Everything else will be kept. Now at a later stage, we're obviously going to go back in and remove these pencil lines on the outside of the half lap, but remember, we want to keep this part of the wood. Okay, so that's part C. Part D, remember, has the mitre at the top. So this will just end up being a mirror image of that one. You would see the half lap down at that bottom corner. We'll go ahead and do that. Okay, and that's that done. So at the front of the box, half lap is marked at the bottom. That's clearly where the bottom of the wood would go. Okay, we put C and D there. We'll bring A back up to the top, and we'll bring B back down to the bottom. So that gives you an understanding of which parts would fit where. Okay, that's the mitre joint done. Half lap joints are marked out too. The next thing to think about is the rebate joint. So for the rebate joint, I'll just bring the birdhouse box back in, turn the camera up for you. So the rebate joint, remember, is a cut being marked out and removed, wood removed from the inside of the top piece here, the back piece here, the bottom piece here, and this piece here, large enough to accommodate the thickness of this acrylic face that we have to keep it flush on the front, but also deep enough into the wood that it doesn't fall through or come out of place. So to help us out, what we're going to do is just place that to the side for now. And while we've got all four pieces of wood together, what we're going to do is we're going to mark that edge that we have to cut. So I'll mark that just with a little triangle here, a little arrow. And this is kind of a half the symbol that you use to show that the wood's actually square, but we'll do that at a later stage. That's something we'll cover in woodwork. So this tells me where the rebate's going to go on each piece. You can do it that way, or you can open the whole thing up and mark rebate. So right there we are, rebate, and an arrow pointing to the edge that the rebate would go on. And you could do that in all four pieces. Okay, so each one has rebate and showing us what edge those would be. I think we'll take away the two sides and the bottom for the moment, and we'll do this on the top. And the rebate would be marked out on the outside edge here and also the inside here. It would only happen on one edge. Now it's so important to make sure that the rebate is marked on the inside of the material. There's tons of pupils in the past who have actually cut joints, then gone to do the rebate and put the rebate on the outside, ruining the piece of wood and having to start from the beginning. So the rebate, I like to keep rebates just square. It doesn't really need to be any deeper than that on this product. So if we know that the acrylic that fits into the wood on this edge is 3mm thick, I think we'll just make the rebate on both the inside and the top edge 3mm. So we'll need to take the marking gauge again. I'm going to loosen that off, so we're losing the 6mm size that we had before. I'm then going to set the 3mm. Happy with that. Tighten it up with a thumb screw, steel rule out of the way. And I should be doing this on the edge of the bench, remember, but this is just to speed things up a wee bit in the video for you. Okay, so hold against the edge of the bench, hold the stock, and the stem against the wood and mark all the way along that top edge. Turn it the opposite direction just to get it from the end. Flip the wood over. You'll be doing this against the edge of the bench again. Hold the stock and draw down. I'm going to pull back on that edge. Okay. I do apologise, this is a wee bit awkward to show you on camera. We're trying to fit so many things in, but you would be working on the edge of the bench with this. Okay, pencil in that groove that you've made. Same on the other side. So the rebate would appear like that. This is the wood to be removed. So we need to hatch tiny little 45-degree lines all the way across there. And then all the way across there, just to show you where that rebate is. Okay, and that's the rebate marked out on that piece. I'll just do the other three. Okay, and that shows you all 4 rebates now marked. Front and the back, top and the bottom. So the mitre joints have been marked out, the half lap joints have been marked out, the rebate joints have been marked out. We've referenced tools and equipment. You understand that you have to take your sizes from the drawing and the dimensions that you've placed on that. If any are incorrect when you come to do it, you can point that out to me and let me know. Now, the only thing left to do now, if we take the top, the back and the bottom out of the way and put the exemplar out, I'll bring the drawing back in. And the only other thing left to mark just now on this piece is obviously the front piece, is the positions for the 2 holes that we have. Now, first hole is obviously the entryway for the bird to fit in. The second one is the hole for the perch, the dowling, to fit in. Now, on the drawing, I've clearly got the diameter of the entry hole, and I think we had even decided that the dowling would be 6mm, and that's absolutely fine. What you don't need to do here is you don't need to replicate the circle that the hole would actually be. All you need to do is measure and mark the positioning of the centre of those circles. These would be the points that the drill would actually go into. So drawing the circle on the outside, that doesn't do anything for you at all. It's just the centres we're looking for. Now, what we didn't do on this drawing was we didn't decide how far in and how far down or how far up each of these positions were going to be. So that was omitted from the drawings and it really should have been there. So what we're going to do is we'll bring the exemplar back in and we'll take sizes from this. Now, my research has shown me at the time that this was the optimum place for positioning the hole for the birds. I think we'll go back to the exemplar model and just use this. So if we come down to the, we'll take the steel rope from the front to the top of the circle, we get 25. We know it's a 30mm hole that we're putting through the thing. So we'll just half that, 15 onto the 25 is going to give us 40. And what we're going to do here is measure, steel rule on the edge. We're going to measure and mark down a size of 40, and that's just a bit there. Take the tri-square and we'll chase a line lightly across that top surface. Don't forget this is the outside of the birdhouse, and although poplar is pretty durable, if you're to lean too heavily with your pencil, that's a great big score that you're going to be putting across the grain, and it can be difficult to remove and could be unsightly. Okay, next thing we're going to do is measure in the way. So in the way, let's make that 15. It's 15, let's go for 30. So we can take the steel rule, and in this instance we can measure and mark 30 there. That gives us a little point. And the other thing is, because we need that point to be exactly the same distance in the way as the point for the smaller hole, we don't want to be doing too much measuring and marking out again. So to make this faster, we're measuring in from the outside edge of the material. So we can take the marking gauge just set that to the 30, put a mark there, and then make a little mark very lightly down that grain. Okay. And on the exemplar model, mark the distance up. Let's go for 50. 50 sounds okay. We'll measure and mark 50 up. Gives us that little point here. We'll mark those with a little crosshair. I'll do this in pen so it's more visible to you. You just do this in pencil if you were doing it on your own. So that gives us a point there and there. And that's going to be the position of both holes for the front of the birdhouse. Now we're not done there. If we had to go ahead and just drill into those, I'm quite confident that it would work okay, but the other thing that could happen is that if the wood is particularly dense, either from the heartwood or the sapwood, you can see where the split in the line is here for that, there is a chance that the drill could go off of centre just as you're drilling through. So to kind of combat that, the other thing we can do after we mark out is we can reach for the bradawl, and we would position the bradawl just in the crosshair, make a little mark and give it a little twist, and then do the same thing on the other mark and give it a little twist. And that just creates two little indents to help the drill locate itself as it's beginning to drill through. So front piece is done. All the other pieces are done. I'm very aware that what we haven't discussed is the fact that it would be cut, that my idea here would be cut at an angle, but that's something we would leave to much later. The box, in fact, would be cut and constructed and glued up and clamped before the rest of that material is removed. We can do that quite quickly on the bandsaw. So that's measuring marking of the 4 pieces of poplar with miter joints marked out, half lap joints marked out, and rebate joints marked out. The only thing that I've still to do on it is put my name lightly on each piece of wood and maybe tape it up so it could be stored in a box. And we are ready for the next stage, which is cutting.